That kind of imperfection for me is the perfection. My studio space is located here in Lisbon, in Portugal, where I'm based now. My space is in the spare room of my apartment. There's something about having my space here at home, which I really like, because I'm a night owl person as well, so I usually stay up very late. And I never know when I might get inspired or when I want to work on music. And I just find having my setup accessible, where I can go to it any time of the day, is something that I've always really appreciated. My approach is really just experimentation. Most of the tracks that I've made, and I think the best things that I've made, have always been when I'm just completely experimenting and playing around with no real intention. Sometimes I might have an idea or something that I want to see if I can recreate, but I find most of the time it doesn't work out, or the result is never what I initially intended or what I had in my mind. And then eventually something might click, or I might hear something that sparks an idea. So I use FL Studio, formerly known as Fruity Loops, which is quite funny when I tell people, because for some reason most people are always surprised by that. I've been using that since the beginning. It's just what I started on, and it's what I've become comfortable with. I've tried out other DAWs, like I've used Ableton and Logic and stuff in the past, but for me, FL Studio really feels like the most blank canvas DAW in terms of how you can arrange, how you can route things. It's really open to your own interpretation. It works a bit differently. For example, every time you have a sound recorded or imported into FL Studio, you need to assign that sound its own mixer channel, rather than it doesn't automatically have its own mixer channel. And this makes it really convenient for creating groups and buses and whatever, but it also can become a bit messy. But for me, I've always loved that chaos, and I think FL Studio has definitely had an impact into how I create music and the sound that I've formed over the years. I don't use the fanciest converter. I use a Focusrite 18i20. I think it has around like 16 to 20 plus ins and outs, some analog, some digital. But then everything that I record runs through an old Tascam M06 submixer, which is this little submixer from the late 80s. In terms of like quality with conversion, it is very important, but I've always been someone who chases the kind of opposite of that. I like things which sound a little bit more like lo-fi and a little bit dirtier, and that kind of imperfection for me is the perfection. You could have the most expensive signal chain in the world, but then that doesn't mean you're going to have good quality sound or that the music's going to sound good. You know, I think the creative processing on how you treat that sound is more important. I use the Octatrack quite a lot. I primarily use it as a sequencer for my synths, and the Dub for Dark Time is also really good just for more randomized sequences. I never sequence anything from the computer. That's one thing with how I use hardware, is it's very separated from the computer. A bit unintuitive at times, but I like just having the hardware completely separated and just playing around and making sequences and recording from into the computer with nothing being clocked. If I'm recording, for example, from a sequencer and then I record that into audio, it's never going to be perfectly on grid. And I also can't be bothered with trying to send out everything from the computer and have everything clocked perfectly and whatever. For me, if I have something like a rhythm or something playing in the computer, then I'll hit play on the hardware sequencer and I'll just like beat match it with the tempo knob to get it in sync. And then I'll hit record and record everything so it's all in time. But yeah, nothing is ever synced up or clocked or whatever. It's just pure hardware, and then that all gets recorded into audio, and then once it's in audio, then I'll work from it in the computer. have quite a lot of synths and a couple sequences and some effects. I can't say that I have a favorite because I'm always switching around what I'm using. Even though I have quite a lot of things, I don't use everything simultaneously. What I prefer to do is focus on one thing for a certain period of time, record that one synth, and then change it up when I feel like I've gotten tired of that synth. If I start recording multiple sounds from the same source, everything just naturally fits together a little bit easier. Over the last couple years, I've been using the Novation Peak a lot. For me, that's kind of like my Swiss Army knife. You can do everything with it. So it's polyphonic, it has effects. It's like a great all-rounder. I also have some mono stuff from Behringer, like the Pro 1 and the Model D. I'm a Behringer fan. I think the quality of what they make, and it's a controversial topic, but I think the quality of what they make with the emulations and the price that they're at, I think they're amazing. Recently, I also picked up the Swenergizer from Analog Sweden, which is basically a carbon copy emulation of a rare 90 synth called the Energizer. It has one oscillator and a sub-oscillator. It sounds amazing, like it has such a fat filter sound, and it's like so raw and thick and is just amazing for bass lines and anything monophonic, because it sounds so huge that it just always cuts through the mix, even with minimal processing. When it comes to drums, it's usually quite simplistic. I tend to always start with sound design first rather than drums, because my music is very rhythmic, but I try and extract and create most of the rhythm through the synths and the sequences. And then usually the drums is something that I just fit to the sound design afterwards. And it usually means that my drums are quite simple. When it comes to like hi-hats and stuff, I might either just record some like 909s or 808s. I also like to use shakers, like real shaker sounds quite a lot. But I do like to use more of the classic stuff as a main backbone, whether it be like 909 hats, 909 kick drums or 808s. I find they're a really good starting point to process and manipulate. I never just use it completely raw. I usually always do a little bit of processing to it to get it sounding not so obviously like a 909 or an 808, but I find as a source, they work really well. The mixdown, the main mixdown will get done in the box. All of the corrective processing will get done in the box, so like corrective EQing, compression, all that type of stuff. But I also have some hardware effects that I record the synth through and record straight into the computer. So usually when I'm recording in, the sounds will already go through some sort of processing and some sort of effects, whether that be driving them a bit on the desk, adding some EQ, recording with some effects, like the SE70 effects unit I have has like amazing flanges and phases and reverbs and stuff. I'm a bit unconventional in how I like to record sounds. I don't separate everything. Like for me, recording a sound that already has effects on it, like whether it be reverbs, delays, a phaser, whatever it might be, I like to record that all on the same thing, because then when I start processing that audio in the computer and maybe adding more effects or pitching it or resampling it, you're also affecting all of the effects that you've recorded onto that sound. And for me, that's how you get much more interesting results, rather than having everything separated and printing the effects so you can mix everything specifically. When you get the sounds right at the source and you give them enough texture and character and enough of an identity at the source, then the mixdown process becomes a lot easier.